Let the day slowly fade away, and feel your body coming to rest. This is your path into a world of stillness, starlight, and gentle dreaming. Take a deep breath, and sink softly into the night. Your journey begins now. Close your eyes and imagine walking through a forest as summer fades. The air has changed, there's a crispness to it now, a gentle coolness that wasn't there just weeks ago. The light falls differently through the trees, golden and slanted, casting long shadows across paths carpeted with leaves. This is autumn, nature's most painterly season, when the world transforms in ways both subtle and spectacular. Let us wander together through this season of change, discovering the quiet miracles happening all around us. The timing is exquisite. Trees sense the changing length of daylight through specialized proteins in their leaves, beginning their transformation at precisely the right moment for their species and location. The garden spiders, orb weavers with their distinctive circular webs, reach their maximum size in autumn, having spent the entire growing season hunting and maturing. The females are now gravid with eggs, and their web building becomes especially impressive. A single garden spider might consume and rebuild her web every single night, eating the old silk to recycle its proteins. Silk production is metabolically expensive. Just before dawn, she spins a new web in the same location, a process taking about an hour. These autumn webs can span several feet and contain over 1,000 feet of silk. After mating in autumn, the female produces an egg sac containing hundreds of eggs, which she attaches to a protected location, under bark, in a rolled leaf, or in a building's eaves. She then dies with the first hard frost, her life's work complete, her offspring sealed safely in silk to emerge next spring. Trees demonstrate remarkable precision in their autumn leaf drop, a process called abscission that's far from random. Each tree species drops its leaves in a characteristic pattern and timing. Ash trees often lose all their leaves within a few days, sometimes overnight. Oak trees hold their leaves well into winter, a trait called marcescence. This variation isn't accidental, it reflects different evolutionary strategies. Early leaf drop allows trees to conserve water and avoid storm damage, but it also means giving up weeks of potential photosynthesis. Late leaf retention protects terminal buds from browsing deer and harsh weather. Some botanists suggest that oaks hold their leaves to drop them in spring, creating a sudden mulch that suppresses competing vegetation just as growing season begins. The exact timing depends on species, genetics, day length, temperature, and individual tree health, a complex calculation performed by each tree based on environmental signals and evolutionary heritage. Snakes, as autumn progresses, begin their journey toward hibernacula, the specific sites where they'll spend winter in dormancy. Many species are loyal to particular hibernation sites, returning to the same locations year after year, sometimes traveling several miles to reach them. These sites have specific requirements. They must be below the frost line but not so deep that snakes can't emerge in spring. They need proper humidity levels, and they must have entrance holes that don't flood. In some locations, hundreds or even thousands of snakes from multiple species will share a single suitable hibernaculum, creating massive autumn gatherings as snakes converge from across the landscape. Garter snakes in Manitoba form hibernating groups of tens of thousands. This communal denning provides thermal mass. The combined body heat of many snakes creates a slightly warmer microclimate, and may also serve social functions that scientists are still working to understand. The mushrooms fruiting in autumn forests include some of nature's most fascinating organisms. The honey mushroom, spreading through underground networks, uses bioluminescence. Its mycelium glows faintly in the dark, creating what has been called foxfire, a ghostly green light sometimes visible in rotting logs. The purpose of this glow remains debated, though some scientists suggest it attracts insects that help disperse spores. Autumn mushrooms have evolved diverse spore dispersal strategies. Some release spores that drift on air currents, others develop sticky spores that adhere to passing animals, and still others produce odors ranging from pleasant to putrid to attract specific dispersers. The stinkhorn mushroom produces a smell like rotting meat that attracts flies, which then carry spores on their feet. Each strategy represents millions of years of evolution, fungi solving the challenge of reproduction and dispersal without mobility, rooted to one spot yet managing to colonize vast territories. The Great Lakes and other large bodies of water undergo dramatic autumn changes that influence weather patterns for hundreds of miles around them. As air temperatures drop faster than water temperatures, these massive reservoirs of heat create what meteorologists call lake effect. Warm, moist air rising from the water surface meets cold air above, creating towering clouds. In autumn, before the lakes freeze, this phenomenon produces spectacular sunrises and sunsets, with clouds building and dissolving in endless processions. The temperature difference also creates localized weather. Shoreline communities may be 10 or 15 degrees warmer than areas just a few miles inland. This moderating effect extends the growing season in coastal areas, allowing fruit trees and grapevines to thrive where they otherwise couldn't. The lakes are thermal batteries, storing summer's warmth and slowly releasing it through autumn, softening the transition between seasons for all life in their vicinity. Beavers enter their most industrious season in autumn. Though known for industry year-round, their work intensifies as winter approaches. They repair and fortify their lodges, adding fresh mud and branches that will freeze solid, creating an impenetrable fortress against predators. They harvest trees with remarkable efficiency, felling aspens and willows, cutting them into transportable sections, and dragging them to their ponds. But they're not building, they're farming. Beavers store these branches underwater near their lodges, creating underwater food caches they'll access throughout winter when ice covers the pond. A single beaver family might store several tons of branches, enough to sustain them through months when the surface world is locked in ice. Their engineering transforms landscapes. Beaver ponds create wetlands that support countless other species, filter water, prevent erosion, and store groundwater. They're ecosystem architects, and autumn is their season of preparation. The plant world engages in chemical warfare that becomes apparent in autumn. Walnut trees, for instance, produce a compound called juglone in their roots, leaves, and nut husks. As autumn leaves fall and decompose, juglone leaches into the soil, inhibiting the growth of many competing plants, a strategy called allelopathy. Tomatoes, potatoes, and many other plants cannot grow near walnut trees. But some species have evolved resistance, even partnerships. Certain ferns and native wildflowers thrive beneath walnuts, having adapted to tolerate or even benefit from juglone's presence. This chemical communication extends throughout the plant kingdom. Sagebrush releases volatile compounds that inhibit nearby grass growth, preserving water for itself. Sunflowers produce toxins that prevent other sunflowers from germinating nearby. As autumn's decomposition processes release these chemicals, they shape which plants will emerge come spring, creating the distinctive plant communities we observe in different habitats. The phenomenon of false autumn, sometimes called Indian summer, occurs when a period of warm weather follows the first cold snap. This temperature roller coaster confuses neither the trees nor the animals, which respond to day length rather than temperature as their primary signal. But it does affect late-season insects dramatically. Butterflies that had become sluggish may briefly fly again. Crickets resume their songs. Flowers that began to wither produce a few final blooms. These warm reprieves are caused by high-pressure systems bringing warm air northward, creating brief returns to summer-like conditions. For migrating birds still traveling, these warm spells provide crucial feeding opportunities. For hibernating insects and amphibians, the warmth must be resisted. Emerging too early could be fatal. Many species have evolved multi-factor triggers for dormancy, requiring both temperature and photoperiod changes, protecting them from false signals that might lure them out prematurely. Autumn's cooling soil triggers the formation of frost flowers, ephemeral ice sculptures that form on certain plant stems during the first hard freezes. These delicate ribbons and curls of ice appear when water in plant stems freezes and expands, pushing out through cracks in the stem and immediately freezing into elaborate shapes. Frostweed and white crownbeard are particularly known for producing these formations. The ice emerges like white ribbons, sometimes creating structures several inches tall, twisted and curved in patterns that seem impossibly delicate. They last only until sunrise melts them, existing in a narrow window between night's cold and morning's warmth. These formations occur only once or twice per stem per season. Once the stem cracks, the pathway is broken. They're a reminder that autumn deals in ephemera, in beauty that exists for moments, in transformations that happen once and never repeat quite the same way. Owls and other raptors undergo their own autumn transformations, molting and replacing their flight feathers in a carefully sequenced pattern that never leaves them unable to fly. Unlike songbirds, which may molt all their feathers relatively quickly, raptors must maintain flight capability for hunting. They can't afford a period of flightlessness. They shed and replace feathers symmetrically, one or two at a time from each wing, maintaining balance and aerodynamics throughout the process. The new feathers emerging in autumn are fresh and pristine compared to the worn feathers of summer, improving their flight efficiency just as prey becomes more challenging to catch in winter's sparse landscape. The molt also includes facial disc feathers in owls, the specialized feathers that direct sound to their ears, ensuring their hearing remains acute for winter hunting in darkness and snow. The asters and goldenrods of autumn meadows create visual signals visible to insects but invisible to human eyes. Many flowers reflect ultraviolet light in patterns that guide pollinators to nectar sources, runways and bullseyes visible only to creatures that can see in UV spectrum. Bees, butterflies, and many other insects perceive these patterns, which direct them to the flower center where pollination occurs. As autumn progresses and insect populations dwindle, these remaining flowers compete intensely for the few remaining pollinators. Some late-season flowers have evolved stronger UV patterns, more concentrated nectar, or scents specifically attractive to autumn insects. The meadow we see with human eyes, pretty but straightforward, is to an insect eye a landscape of glowing signs and signals, a complex visual language advertising resources and directing traffic in ways we can only imagine. Chipmunks take a different approach to winter than their squirrel cousins. While squirrels remain active all winter, visiting their scattered food caches, chipmunks create centralized larders, underground chambers packed with seeds, nuts, and other food items. A single chipmunk may store several pounds of food in its burrow system. In autumn, they make dozens of trips daily, their cheek pouches bulging comically with seeds, racing against the calendar to accumulate sufficient stores. Unlike true hibernators, chipmunks enter a state of torpor but wake periodically throughout winter to eat from their pantries, maintain their nests, and eliminate waste. Their heart rate and body temperature drop significantly, but not as dramatically as bears or ground squirrels. This strategy, torpor with periodic waking, requires substantial food stores but allows for a faster spring emergence, as they don't need to rebuild depleted body tissues the way true hibernators do. The stars and planets shift position in the autumn sky, marking the passage of time with celestial precision. Jupiter and Saturn, the gas giants, are often prominently visible in autumn evenings, bright enough to cast faint shadows on moonless nights. These planets influenced human culture for millennia, but they also influence Earth in subtle ways. Their gravitational pull affects Earth's orbital variations over thousands of years, contributing to Ice Age cycles. The Pleiades star cluster, that small dipper of stars visible to the naked eye, rises in the eastern sky after sunset in autumn. Ancient cultures worldwide used the Pleiades as a calendar. Their heliacal rising, first appearance in the dawn sky, marked the beginning of various cultural new years, planting seasons, or harvest times. Even today, disconnected from agricultural cycles, we respond to these celestial changes with some ancient part of our awareness, sensing time's passage written in the stars. The very last insects of autumn include the autumn meadowhawk dragonflies, which can be seen flying on surprisingly cold days, even when frost covers the ground. These delicate-looking creatures have evolved remarkable cold tolerance, able to remain active in temperatures that immobilize other insects. They accomplish this through behavioral thermoregulation, basking in any available sunlight, vibrating their flight muscles to generate heat, and choosing sheltered microclimates where temperatures remain a few degrees warmer. These late-season dragonflies are often the only insects visible, patrolling over ponds and fields in solitary flight. They're hunting the very last mosquitoes and midges, which also possess cold tolerance. Watching an autumn meadowhawk on a cold October day, the only moving thing in a still landscape, feels like witnessing life's determination, its refusal to surrender even as the season demands it. Porcupines, those slow-moving, quill-covered rodents, prepare for winter by changing their diet and behavior in autumn. Throughout summer they feed on leaves, flowers, and green vegetation, but as these disappear, they shift to bark, stripping it from trees in distinctive patterns. They show preference for certain species, hemlock, pine, and aspen, and will actually girdle trees by eating bark all the way around, which kills the tree. While this seems destructive, it serves ecological purposes. Dead trees become habitat for cavity-nesting birds, insects, and fungi. Porcupines also develop thicker fur and add body fat in autumn, though they don't hibernate. They remain active throughout winter, resting in rock crevices, hollow logs, or tree cavities during the coldest days, emerging to feed when conditions allow. Their autumn preparations are modest compared to many animals. They're built for endurance rather than avoidance, accepting winter's challenges rather than fleeing or sleeping through them. The northern lights, aurora borealis, are often most visible during autumn and spring due to the orientation of Earth's magnetic field relative to the Sun during the equinoxes. During these periods, solar wind particles find easier entry into Earth's magnetosphere, creating increased auroral activity. Indigenous peoples across the northern latitudes have countless interpretations of the aurora, spirits dancing, ancestors playing games, omens of change. Animals respond to the aurora as well, though we're only beginning to understand how. Migratory birds may use auroral displays as navigation aids, and reindeer, which can see ultraviolet light, perceive the aurora differently than humans do, possibly seeing patterns and intensities invisible to us. The autumn aurora dances over landscapes preparing for winter, a reminder that Earth exists within a dynamic cosmic environment, constantly bathed in solar wind and particles from beyond. Seeds demonstrate extraordinary patience and specificity in their germination requirements, traits that become apparent in autumn as they settle into the soil. Many seeds require stratification, exposure to cold, moist conditions, before they'll germinate. This prevents them from sprouting in autumn only to be killed by winter. They must experience weeks or months of near-freezing temperatures, a counter that ensures they won't awaken until spring truly arrives. Other seeds require scarification. Their seed coats must be scratched, burned, or digested before water can penetrate and germination begin. Some seeds can remain viable for decades or even centuries, waiting for conditions that may not arrive for generations. In this way, seeds are time travelers, packages of potential that can wait longer than the individual plants that produce them live, betting on futures they'll never see. The last butterflies of autumn often seek shelter in the same locations where they'll spend winter in diapause, a state of suspended development different from hibernation. Mourning cloaks, for instance, find loose bark, wood piles, or unheated buildings where they'll spend winter in a dormant state, neither growing nor aging, their development simply paused. They produce cryoprotectants, biological antifreeze, that prevents ice crystals from forming in their bodies. Come spring, they'll be among the first butterflies to emerge, flying on cold March days when snow still covers the ground. Question marks and Compton tortoiseshells employ similar strategies. These butterflies often live 9 months or more, extraordinary longevity for insects, spending most of that time in suspended animation. They experience two worlds, the dying autumn and the nascent spring, bookends of the cold season they sleep through. Autumn streams carry more than just fallen leaves, they transport the chemical signatures of the changing season. Tannins leaching from decomposing leaves tint the water amber or tea-colored, a phenomenon especially pronounced after heavy rains. These tannins, the same compounds that give tea and wine their astringency, are natural products of leaf decomposition. They lower water pH slightly, creating conditions that favor certain aquatic organisms over others. Brook trout and other fish that evolved in forested watersheds are adapted to these seasonal tannin pulses. The colored water also affects light penetration, changing the aquatic environment for photosynthetic algae and plants. This chemical transformation is temporary. By winter, much of the tannin will have been processed by bacteria or settled with sediments, but for weeks in autumn, the streams literally run with the essence of fallen leaves, the forest bleeding its colors into moving water. Autumn streams carry more than just fallen leaves, they transport the chemical signatures of the changing season. Tannins leaching from decomposing leaves tint the water amber or tea-colored, a phenomenon especially pronounced after heavy rains. These tannins, the same compounds that give tea and wine their astringency, are natural products of leaf decomposition. They lower water pH slightly, creating conditions that favor certain aquatic organisms over others. Brook trout and other fish that evolved in forested watersheds are adapted to these seasonal tannin pulses. The colored water also affects light penetration, changing the aquatic environment for photosynthetic algae and plants. This chemical transformation is temporary. By winter, much of the tannin will have been processed by bacteria or settled with sediments, but for weeks in autumn, the streams literally run with the essence of fallen leaves, the forest bleeding its colors into moving water. Box turtles, those terrestrial turtles with hinged shells that close completely, begin their winter preparations by seeking out forest floors with deep leaf litter. Unlike aquatic turtles that submerge in pond bottoms, box turtles dig into loose soil and cover themselves with leaves, creating insulated chambers where they'll spend winter in brumation, a reptilian form of dormancy. Their body temperature drops to match their surroundings, their metabolism slows to a fraction of its summer rate, and their heart may beat only once every 5 to 10 minutes. Box turtles can live over 100 years, meaning the oldest individuals have experienced more than 100 autumns, have buried themselves in leaves beneath trees that themselves have been replaced multiple generations. Their living archives of seasonal change, their long lives spanning transformations in forest composition, climate patterns, and landscape features that shift too slowly for shorter-lived observers to perceive. The phenomenon of autumn overturn in ponds creates brief windows of opportunity for organisms that specialize in these transitional moments. As surface water cools and sinks, nutrients from the bottom rise to the surface. Certain algae and plankton species bloom specifically during these overturn events, timing their life cycles to exploit the nutrient pulse. These blooms, in turn, attract specialized zooplankton that feed on these specific algae. Fish that have spent summer in deep, cool water move to shallows as temperature stratification breaks down, following prey that become newly accessible. Autumn overturn is a reset, a mixing, a brief period when the rigid vertical zones of summer, warm surface, cool depths, dissolve into uniformity before winter's ice imposes its own structure. It's a fluid moment, a transition between stable states, when the water column breathes deeply and redistributes itself. The bark of trees becomes more prominent and beautiful as leaves fall away, revealing textures and patterns hidden all summer. But bark is far more than decoration. It's a complex living tissue that protects, breathes, and communicates. The outer bark is dead tissue, but just beneath it lies the phloem, living cells that transport sugars from leaves to roots. In autumn, as leaves prepare to fall, trees create cork layers in their bark, sealing potential entry points for disease and insects. Some bark contains compounds that deter insect pests. Birch bark produces betulin, which has antifungal properties. The various patterns, the puzzle piece plates of mature pine, the papery layers of birch, the deep furrows of oak, aren't random but reflect each species' solution to the challenges of protection, growth, and gas exchange. As we admire autumn's bare trees, we're really observing countless adaptive strategies written in bark. Crows and ravens, those intelligent corvids, engage in fascinating autumn behaviors that suggest complex social learning. They cache food like squirrels, but with remarkable memory and, some researchers believe, awareness of being watched. Crows will create false caches if they notice other crows observing them, hiding food in one location then moving it after the observer leaves, but only if they themselves have stolen from caches before, suggesting they attribute their own knowledge to others. In autumn, young crows learn from their parents and flock members, acquiring not just cached food locations but the social intelligence of when to trust, when to deceive, and how to read the intentions of others. These birds live in complex societies, and autumn represents a critical learning period for juveniles, as experienced adults teach them survival strategies that go far beyond simple instinct. The last warm days of autumn sometimes bring out snakes for a final basking session before they retreat to their hibernacula. These late autumn appearances can be surprising, a garter snake stretched across a sunny rock on a November day when frost still glitters in shadows. This basking isn't frivolous, it serves a crucial purpose. The warmth allows snakes to complete digestion of their last meals before dormancy, and it may help trigger final physiological changes that prepare them for months without food or water. Snakes that enter hibernation with undigested food in their stomachs may suffer bacterial infections as the food rots internally at low temperatures. These final basking sessions are calculated risks. Emerging exposes them to predators and uses precious energy, but the thermal boost provides benefits that outweigh the dangers. They're reading the season carefully, taking advantage of every resource autumn offers. Autumn wind carries seeds in ways both obvious and hidden. The familiar helicopter seeds of maples, the parachutes of dandelions and milkweed, the winged seeds of ash and elm, all are adaptations for wind dispersal. But the efficiency varies dramatically based on design. Maple seeds spin as they fall, slowing their descent and allowing wind to carry them laterally. A single seed might travel several hundred yards from its parent tree. Scientists have studied these seeds to improve drone and helicopter design. Dandelion seeds are even more remarkable. Their feathery pappus creates a vortex ring above the seed, a bubble of stable, recirculating air that acts like a parachute. This allows dandelion seeds to travel for miles on even gentle breezes, remaining airborne for hours. Autumn wind is a transportation network, moving genetic material across landscapes, ensuring that individual plants contribute to populations far beyond their rooted locations. The ground beneath our feet freezes and thaws repeatedly during autumn's temperature swings, a process that creates unique soil structures. As water in soil freezes, it expands and pushes soil particles upward. Rocks embedded in soil gradually work their way to the surface through repeated freeze-thaw cycles, a process that can take years or decades but explains why freshly cleared fields seem to grow new rocks each spring. This same process creates patterned ground in Arctic and alpine regions, stone circles, polygons, and stripes formed by countless freeze-thaw cycles sorting stones by size. Even in temperate regions, autumn's freeze-thaw action contributes to soil mixing, bringing nutrients toward the surface and creating the loose, friable structure that plants prefer. Frost is a gardener, turning and aerating soil in ways that benefit spring growth. The ground is never quite still, it breathes with the seasons, expanding and contracting, rising and settling in rhythms tied to temperature and moisture. Owls cache food during autumn abundance, but unlike many animals that hide food and find it later by memory or scent, owls often simply wedge prey into tree forks or other locations and rely on freezing temperatures to preserve it. A great gray owl might kill several voles in good hunting weather, eating one and storing the others for later consumption. In cold climates, these stored meals freeze solid, remaining edible for weeks. This strategy only works where temperatures reliably stay below freezing, which is why it's more common in northern populations. The owl's adaptation isn't in food preservation technique but in opportunistic use of environmental conditions, letting winter itself be the refrigerator. It's a strategy that requires no complex caching behavior or spatial memory, just awareness of temperature and timing, taking advantage of the season's gifts. The last migratory birds passing through in late autumn are often the most weather-hardy species: dark-eyed juncos, American tree sparrows, and snow buntings that breed in the far north and consider temperate regions their warm winter destination. These birds time their migration to stay just ahead of serious winter weather, moving south in waves as cold fronts push down from the Arctic. They're built for cold, thick plumage, efficient metabolism, and behaviors that conserve heat. Juncos, sometimes called snowbirds, often arrive with the first snowflakes, their slate-gray backs and white bellies flashing as they forage in mixed flocks beneath bird feeders. Their arrival marks autumn's transition toward winter for many human observers, a reliable signal that the season is changing. These birds don't flee winter. They embrace it, just in locations where winter is manageable rather than extreme. Autumn phosphorescence in decaying wood reaches its peak as temperatures cool and moisture increases. Bioluminescent fungi, particularly species of Armillaria and Pinellus, produce a gentle green glow from their mycelium growing in rotting logs. This foxfire, as it's traditionally called, is bright enough to read by if your eyes are fully dark adapted, though it appears as barely a glimmer to eyes accustomed to artificial light. The biological purpose of this light production remains debated. It may attract insects that help disperse spores, or it may simply be a metabolic byproduct with no adaptive purpose. Walking through a dark autumn forest, you might see fallen logs glowing faintly, marking the locations where fungi are slowly transforming wood into soil. It's a reminder that even in darkness, even in decay, there is light, that decomposition itself can be luminous. The angle of autumn sunlight creates optical phenomena that are rare or invisible in other seasons. Sundogs, bright spots that appear on either side of the sun, occur when sunlight refracts through ice crystals in high, cold clouds. These are more common in autumn and winter when atmospheric conditions favor ice crystal formation. Autumn also brings crepuscular rays, those beams of sunlight that stream through gaps in clouds, sometimes called God rays, which are more visible when the sun is low on the horizon and atmospheric dust and moisture scatter the light. These aren't different rays but rather the same sunlight made visible by particles in the air. We see the architecture of light itself, the beams that are always present but usually invisible. Autumn makes the invisible visible, revealing the structure underlying what we normally take for granted. The very last flowers of the season are often the most determined survivors. Witch hazel blooms in November, sometimes even December, producing fragrant yellow flowers with ribbon-like petals that curl up in freezing temperatures and unfurl again when it warms, a strategy that protects delicate tissues from frost damage. This late blooming means almost no competition for pollinators, though few insects remain active. The flowers are primarily pollinated by small flies and moths that still fly on warmer autumn days. Witch hazel seeds take a full year to mature, and when they finally ripen the following autumn, the seed capsules explosively eject seeds up to 30 feet away, a ballistic dispersal that can be heard as a faint popping in quiet forests. This tree operates on its own timeline, blooming when others rest, fruiting when others bloom, following rhythms that seem contrary but have proven successful for millions of years. Beneath the leaf litter, salamanders are settling into their winter refuges, spaces beneath logs, inside rotting stumps, or in burrows deep enough to avoid freezing. Unlike frogs that can tolerate partial freezing, most salamanders must avoid ice formation in their tissues entirely. They seek locations where temperature remains above freezing but below their active range, a narrow window typically between 32 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Red-backed salamanders, the most abundant vertebrate in many eastern forests, gather in small groups in favorable microsites, sometimes dozens sharing a single rotting log. This aggregation may provide thermal benefits, or it may simply reflect the scarcity of truly ideal hibernation sites. These creatures breathe through their skin, requiring moisture year-round, so their winter refuges must maintain humidity as well as appropriate temperature. They're negotiating multiple requirements simultaneously, finding the rare locations where all conditions align. The soil food web shifts dramatically in late autumn as temperatures drop and surface activity slows. Bacteria that thrive in warm conditions become dormant, while cold-adapted species take over. Fungi, which generally tolerate cold better than bacteria, assume greater importance in decomposition processes. The balance of power in the microscopic world shifts entirely. Species that dominated summer's soil become inactive, while winter specialists emerge. Some soil bacteria form endospores, incredibly resistant structures that can survive complete desiccation, extreme temperatures, and even radiation, waiting years or decades for favorable conditions to return. Others simply slow their metabolism to near nothing, existing in a state of maintenance rather than growth. This invisible transition beneath our feet represents a complete changeover of the workforce that processes nutrients, controls pathogens, and maintains soil health. The soil in November functions fundamentally differently than the soil in July, though to the eye they appear identical. Hawks and other raptors that don't migrate south adjust their hunting strategies as autumn's abundance gives way to winter's scarcity. Red-tailed hawks shift from hunting in open fields where rodents are exposed to focusing on edges and sheltered areas where prey seeks cover. Their eyesight, already 8 times sharper than human vision, becomes even more valuable as prey becomes sparse and wary. These birds can see ultraviolet light, which means they can detect the urine trails that voles leave in grass and snow. The trails appear as glowing paths visible only to UV-sensitive eyes, leading directly to active burrows and feeding areas. As autumn vegetation dies back, these trails become more visible, giving hawks a unique advantage. Evolution has equipped them with senses we can barely imagine, allowing them to perceive a world of signals invisible to us. The last insects to succumb to cold are often the cluster flies and Asian lady beetles that seek shelter inside buildings and other structures. These insects engage in massive aggregations, sometimes thousands gathering in attics, wall voids, or other protected spaces. The aggregation itself serves a purpose. The combined body heat of thousands of insects creates a warmer microclimate, and pheromones released by early arrivals attract others, creating a positive feedback loop. These insects enter diapause, a state of suspended development where they neither feed nor reproduce, simply waiting out the cold months. Occasionally warm days will rouse them to brief, confused activity, crawling on windows or buzzing sluggishly, but they quickly return to dormancy when temperatures drop. They're neither alive in the fullest sense nor dead, but suspended between states, their biological clocks stopped until spring's warmth resets them. Late autumn rain has a different character than earlier autumn precipitation. It's often colder, more persistent, and arrives in gray systems that settle over the landscape for days. This rain penetrates deep into soil that's no longer protected by summer's transpiring plants, recharging aquifers and groundwater reserves that will sustain springs, streams, and wells throughout the following year. In regions with Mediterranean climates, these autumn rains mark the true beginning of the growing season, triggering the germination of annual wildflowers that will bloom in winter and spring. The rain also washes nutrients from decomposing leaves into the soil, completing the transfer of resources from leaf to earth. Without autumn rain, spring growth would be impoverished, dependent only on what nutrients remained from previous years. The rain is an essential courier, moving resources from one generation of plants to the next. Coyotes and wolves become more vocal in late autumn, their howls carrying farther in cold, dense air. These vocalizations serve multiple purposes: maintaining pack cohesion, advertising territory, and coordinating hunts. A single coyote can produce sounds that seem like a whole pack howling, using rapidly changing pitches and tones to create acoustic illusions. This deceptive chorus may make their group seem larger to potential rivals. The howling increases in autumn partly because young animals born in spring are now large enough to participate, their voices joining the family chorus for the first time. These vocal groups strengthen social bonds that will be crucial for winter survival when hunting becomes more difficult and territories are contested more intensely. The night air of late autumn carries these wild songs, communications in a language older than human speech, connecting members of a community we rarely see but that persists in the shadows of our settled landscapes. The last butterflies and moths of autumn include species that overwinter as adults, finding protected locations in bark crevices, under bridges, or inside caves. The underwing moths, large, beautiful species with colorful hindwings hidden beneath camouflaged forewings, spend winter as adults in a state of deep dormancy. Their antifreeze compounds allow them to survive temperatures well below freezing. When spring arrives, they'll be among the first moths flying, taking advantage of early flowers and the absence of predators. The morning cloak butterfly, dark wings edged in pale yellow, also overwinters as an adult, emerging on the first warm days of late winter to feed on tree sap flowing from wounds or early pussy willow catkins. These insects have traded the strategy of producing protected eggs for the strategy of protecting themselves, betting their survival on their own resilience rather than the resilience of the next generation. The bare branches of late autumn reveal birds' nests that were hidden all summer, intricately woven structures that endured rain, wind, and the weight of growing nestlings. These architectural marvels, now abandoned, demonstrate remarkable engineering. A robin's nest uses mud as mortar between layers of grass and twigs. An oriole's nest hangs like a woven sock, sewn to branches with plant fibers and animal hair. A hummingbird's nest, tiny as a walnut shell, is covered with lichen camouflage held in place with spider silk, which stretches as the nestlings grow. Most birds build new nests each year rather than reusing old ones, which may harbor parasites or have structural damage. These visible nests are monuments to parental devotion, structures that served their purpose and are now returned to the ecosystem. They'll decompose slowly, providing nesting material for mice, insects, and next year's birds, which will cannibalize old nests to build new ones. Nothing is wasted, everything circles back into use. The very last leaves clinging to trees in late autumn often tell stories of individual survival and adaptation. Oak leaves, especially, practice marcescence, holding their dead leaves through winter, particularly on younger trees. Scientists believe this evolved as protection for tender terminal buds from browsing deer and harsh weather, or perhaps to drop nutrient-rich leaves in spring when they'll decompose faster and benefit the tree's own roots rather than nourishing competitors. Each species has its own leaf drop timeline, refined through millions of years. Beech trees also hold leaves through winter on young growth. These persistent leaves rattle in winter winds, creating sounds that were once the only music in winter forests before evergreens spread widely. They're not mistakes or failures to complete autumn's work, but deliberate strategies, leaves held for purpose even in death. Millipedes and centipedes retreat deep into soil and under logs as autumn ends, seeking stable temperatures and moisture. Despite their similar appearance, these creatures represent very different evolutionary strategies. Millipedes are detritivores, gentle consumers of decaying plant matter, with 2 pairs of legs per body segment, moving slowly like living waves. Centipedes are predators, venomous hunters with 1 pair of legs per segment, moving with startling speed to capture prey. Both are ancient lineages that have persisted for hundreds of millions of years, far longer than mammals or flowering plants. As they settle into winter dormancy, they're following instincts older than autumn itself. Their ancestors were among Earth's first land animals, crawling from ancient seas onto barren shores long before the first trees existed. They've survived countless mass extinctions, and they'll survive this winter, as their kind has survived countless millions of winters before. The crystalline structure of frost that forms on cold autumn mornings is actually a form of ice crystal growth that follows mathematical patterns. Frost doesn't simply freeze randomly but grows in branching, fractal patterns, each crystal a miniature tree of ice, with 6-fold symmetry reflecting the hexagonal structure of water molecules. Hoarfrost, the delicate feathery frost that decorates every surface on cold, humid mornings, grows as water vapor in the air transitions directly to ice without becoming liquid first, a process called deposition. Each crystal is unique, shaped by the precise temperature and humidity conditions during its formation, yet all follow the same basic hexagonal geometry. This regularity arising from chaos, this order emerging from randomness, reflects fundamental physical laws. The beauty of frost isn't accidental, it's geometry made visible, physics expressed in ice. Voles and mice dig extensive tunnel networks beneath autumn's leaf litter and snow, creating highways invisible to surface observers. These subnivean spaces, the zone between ground and snow, maintain surprisingly stable temperatures, hovering near freezing regardless of air temperature above. A mouse can remain active all winter in this protected environment, feeding on seeds, roots, and bark, rarely if ever emerging into the harsh surface world. Their tunnels can extend for hundreds of feet, connecting feeding areas, nest sites, and escape routes. Predators like foxes and coyotes can hear mice moving in these tunnels and pounce through snow to catch them, a hunting technique that looks like play but is deadly serious. These hidden spaces beneath snow are entire ecosystems, hosting not just mammals but insects, spiders, and even some species of ground-nesting bees that remain somewhat active through winter in the relative warmth of the subnivean zone. The silence of late autumn is not truly silence but rather a different soundscape. With leaves fallen, sound travels differently through forests, farther in some ways, as there's less vegetation to absorb it, but also with different quality. The acoustic environment changes entirely. Bird songs are largely absent, replaced by the calls of ravens, crows, and the occasional woodpecker's drumming. Wind sounds different through bare branches than through leaf-covered ones, a rattling, clicking sound rather than the susurrus of summer foliage. Water sounds become more prominent as other sounds fade, the gurgle of streams, the drip of snowmelt, the crack of expanding ice. Animals that remain active use this changed acoustic environment to their advantage, listening for prey or predators across greater distances. The forest hasn't gone quiet, it's speaking a different language, one of winter rather than summer, of survival rather than growth. Turkey vultures, those ungainly but magnificent scavengers, are among the last birds to depart northern regions in late autumn. Unlike most raptors, they rely heavily on smell to locate carrion. They can detect the scent of ethyl mercaptan, a gas produced by decaying animals, from over a mile away while flying. As temperatures drop and decay slows, finding food becomes more difficult, triggering their migration. They travel in groups called kettles, riding thermal updrafts to gain altitude with minimal energy expenditure, then gliding south for miles before finding another thermal. Some individuals travel thousands of miles from Canada to South America. These birds, often unfairly maligned, perform essential ecosystem services, cleaning up carcasses that would otherwise spread disease, recycling nutrients, and maintaining ecological balance. Their departure signals that autumn's abundance of death, fallen animals, insects, the casualties of migration, has been processed, the cleanup complete. The Earth itself tilts more dramatically away from the sun as autumn progresses toward winter solstice, creating the shortest days and longest nights of the year. This tilt, 23.5 degrees from vertical, is responsible for seasons themselves. As the northern hemisphere angles away from the sun, solar energy arrives at an increasingly oblique angle, spreading the same amount of energy over a larger area and passing through more atmosphere. The result is not just less daylight but weaker sunlight. Even at noon, the sun hangs low on the horizon in late autumn, its rays slanting rather than direct. This astronomical reality drives every biological adaptation we've observed: migration, hibernation, leaf fall, dormancy. Everything traces back to this tilt, this orbital dance between Earth and Sun that's remained constant for billions of years. The seasons aren't Earth's moods but its geometry, physics expressed as the passage of time. Lichens, those partnership organisms of fungus and algae, actually grow more in autumn and early winter than in summer in many climates. Summer's heat and dryness stress them, causing dormancy, but autumn's cool moisture activates growth. They absorb water directly from rain and fog, swelling and turning vivid green or yellow or orange within minutes of wetting. In this hydrated state, the algal partner photosynthesizes while the fungal partner mines nutrients from its substrate, rock, bark, or soil. Lichens are extraordinarily slow-growing. Some large individuals may be centuries old, but autumn represents their prime growing season. They're also incredibly resilient. Lichen species have survived exposure to the vacuum of space in experiments, enduring radiation and temperature extremes that would kill virtually any other organism. These humble, overlooked organisms clinging to rocks and trees are among Earth's toughest survivors, and autumn is when they truly thrive. The very last warmth stored in ponds, lakes, and even soil is released gradually through late autumn and early winter, moderating temperature extremes for nearby areas. Water has a high specific heat capacity. It takes substantial energy to warm it, but it also releases that heat slowly when cooling. Large bodies of water act as thermal buffers, keeping nearby land warmer in autumn and cooler in spring. This is why vineyards and orchards are often planted near lakes. The moderated climate extends the growing season and protects against late spring frosts. On a smaller scale, the soil itself retains summer's warmth for weeks after air temperature drops, allowing roots to continue growing, microbes to remain active, and burrowing animals to find refuge. This stored heat, invisible and often unconsidered, is a gift from summer to winter, a buffer against the shock of seasonal transition, a gentling of change that makes survival possible for countless organisms. And finally, autumn teaches us perhaps its most important lesson, that letting go is not loss but transformation, that endings enable beginnings, that death feeds life in ways both literal and profound. Every fallen leaf becomes soil, every migrating bird carries ecosystems on its wings, every sleeping bear trusts in awakening. The season shows us that nature doesn't resist change but flows with it, adapting, transforming, finding beauty in transition. Autumn is not the dying time but the preparing time, the season of faith that what is released will return, that what sleeps will wake, that the wheel will turn again. As we watch the last colors fade, the last leaves fall, the last birds depart, we witness not an ending but a promise, that beneath the apparent death, life persists, patient and certain, waiting for its moment to emerge again into light and warmth and the eternal return of spring. Rest now, as autumn rests. Sleep, as the seeds sleep in soil and the bears sleep in their dens and the trees sleep standing sentinel over the quiet land. Trust in the turning of seasons, in the wisdom of cycles older than memory, in the promise that darkness always gives way to dawn, that winter always yields to spring, that what appears lost is merely hidden, waiting, gathering strength for the grand return.